Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hello again, everybody. It's David, Mike, and Greg with episode 176 of the Near Memo. Today we're going to be talking about part two of our hotel research in Europe, Yelp versus Google, and some thoughts about the trajectory of that case and Google's new revised spam policy. Not necessarily in that order. So, David, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. So just to recap for folks who may not have heard sort of part one, we ran a study of 300 European searchers in Germany, France, and Spain looking for hotels. We prompted them to say that they're going on a long weekend with a friend, and the friend asked them to find a hotel in the city where they're visiting. We found a pretty surprising result that Booking.com actually was the recipient of the plurality of all clicks, which was totally shocking to us. They certainly don't have that level of presence in the United States or Canada. And Google Properties, i.e. the Hotel Finder or Google Maps, came in a sort of close second. But that was a bit of a surprising finding for us that a single aggregator Booking was such a popular destination. In terms of DMA, what do you got, Mike?
David?
Yeah.
Well, does that plurality include their subsidiaries that they own, like Kayak and the other ones?
I believe this was
Booking?
Just Booking. So if you their subsidiaries, Kayak and Momondo, and there was one more, they were all just a very small percentage. So the Booking consortium would have been slightly higher, but not meaningfully so. Yeah.
Okay. Which was a lot about the Booking brand and its recognition in Europe.
Yep. So from a DMA standpoint, Google's introduction of the Places Sites module, we've seen in restaurants in Ireland and as well in hotels now in Europe that there's almost no engagement with that Places Sites module. It received less than 2% of all clicks. Google frequently showed it in either the first or the second position, but they also showed the Hotel Finder at least as frequently in the first or second position. And so people, by and large, were drawn to the Hotel Finder. When it was visible, it received the majority of all clicks. The Hotel Finder...
I would just add there that Google knows full well what drives people, and it's not just position, right? That position is important, but it isn't everything. And Google clearly manipulates that, and we've seen that in other verticals and other modules. Go ahead.
I like how you're raising your hand today, Mike.
Well, I this is a podcast, so I was thinking, I really don't want to just interrupt. Trying to do better,
It's just like you learned in preschool.
Exactly.
That's right. So I was going to say that on the point of the Hotel Finder, one of the reasons that we sort of hypothesized that it didn't receive more clicks is, frankly, and wasn't actually more visible to our searcher panel, is that searchers, especially on mobile devices, rarely made it past the ads at the top of the screen. I shouldn't say rarely. I mean, they did make it past the ads, but ads drove an incredible percentage of clicks. 53% of all clicks on mobile devices went to ads, and so we would hypothesize that the actual engagement with Google Business Profiles and Google's self-preferencing of its own results is probably largely the same in this category if you were able to take a complete screenshot of every SERP, but that ads are so prominent and so compelling to users in this vertical that many just didn't encounter either the Places Sites module or the Hotel Finder because they just didn't make it that far down the SERP. So that was the recap of part one.
But just a point here is that compared to, we've heard very little ad skepticism in this particular search. In other searches like lawyers or doctors, we heard a lot of people voice the fact that, at least in the United States, that they don't typically stop at ads, and we heard none of that in that. And I'm curious whether it's because a hotel reservation is such a transactional thing, or if it's a European. Why are those differences there?
Let me piggyback onto that because I had my question. I don't remember what the results were in terms of ad clicks on Booking.com. There were a pretty high percentage of ad clicks on Booking.com, right?
That's right. Booking received about 2/3 of all of its clicks from ads.
Right. So, I mean, you can answer Mike's question, but I suspect it's because people recognize that the Booking.com brand, it is transactional, as you say. And so they're not making a distinction between an organic link and an ad when, Booking.com is where they want to go, right?
I'll
I mean,
also segue here a little bit deeper into the part two of our results, which was around implications for hotel suppliers. And a number of the ad clicks, a meaningful percentage of ad clicks for booking and for everybody, came from the carousel ad unit that appears at the top of many hotel search results. It was a very rich visual unit with photos of hotels, prices, reviews. Forget, there's a couple of other attributes. So I think that part of the reason potentially that ads are so compelling to users in this particular vertical is that there is this unique unit that doesn't appear in other local search categories. And so, or I should say in local search categories, the EU seems to consider hotels as a totally different vertical from local. So I think that that's part of maybe the issue, Greg, here is why we saw a higher percentage of clicks on ads. Is just there's this very compelling unit that drove a lot of behavior. And in terms of the implications for hotel suppliers, essentially large enterprise brands or independent boutiques who are directly responsible for their own properties. So in total, the number of clicks on carousel ads and also on paid links on Google Business Profiles for individual hotel properties, there were more clicks on those ads than there were on traditional text ads. And so there is an opportunity still here for hotels who may be sort of priced out of traditional ad units. There may be an opportunity for them to compete in those other ad spaces and, in particular, learn from the techniques of Booking.com and other aggregators in terms of the landing page that you send people to from those ads. So Booking.com and other aggregators, instead of sending people to a landing page that only features a single property, they would send people to a list of properties with the selected property at the top, which we hypothesize, and I'm not the only one, Mike, you do as well, hypothesize actually increases the conversion rate from those ads.
Although in the Google Hotel Finder, this is a somewhat disconcerting path to the user. I found it initially to be confusing. I'm looking at a user looking at Hotel A. They click on Hotel A for booking. And then Hotel A is at the top of a long list of other hotels. It's not, I mean, I think it's interesting that Google allows this user experience. It's not very good user experience from my point of view.
I mean, in fact, that's not a best practice with landing pages, right? I mean, the landing page is supposed to correspond to what the user intent is from the query. So if there's a click on a particular link that has a certain kind of content or representation, you're supposed to mirror that on the landing page so that their expectations aren't foiled or confused. And this is kind of somewhere in between that and substitution.
Right. The other thing that Booking did besides this was when there was an ad, they often would one of their subsidiaries would dominate 3 of the 4 ad spots inside the local finder. So the second ad might be Kayak. You'd go to Kayak, you then click on the hotel, it would then take you over to Booking.com. Again, it was a confusing user experience if you didn't know it was going to happen.
Well, one of the things that I find sort of problematic is the way in which in the when you're looking at the GBP listing and there are the links to the different aggregators, hotels.com, Expedia, etc. Sometimes those are ads and sometimes they're not. And they're not always ads, but much of the time they are, and it's that's something that I think users don't understand ultimately. Not that it would change their behavior.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. I would say that the big takeaway, I mean, we've sort of focused on ads here. The other big takeaway I think that hotel suppliers should be aware of is that they're basically entirely dependent on Google Business Profiles for any visibility. There were almost no organic clicks at all. And the organic clicks that happened all went to aggregators. So hotel, you never saw a click through to Accor.com or BB Hotels, I think was another. Hotels BB was another big sort of brand hotel chain that received a lot of clicks from users, but they almost all came from Google Business Profiles.
Well, so this is an interesting situation where hotel brands don't seem to be playing in user clicks, right? I mean, it's the whole discussion around brand that's going on in the SEO world right now. People are not looking for particular hotel brands. Presumably, they're hotel loyalists, and they would go to the hotel itself, Hilton or Accor or whomever. But that's not happening. Is that not happening partly because people are just not scrolling down these pages? They're getting to a familiar aggregator and just clicking through, and they're not taking the time to go further down?
Or
Yeah,
it
I
was
think
a proximity issue. That was the other side of it, right? And David, you could address the map queries.
Well, exactly. So I was going to say, I mean, I think Google is probably going to leverage this in any, I don't know if they even are allowed to negotiate, but any discussions that they have with the European Commission, they're basically going to say, look, this is our only way to give suppliers any visibility whatsoever, is this large map unit with Google Business Profiles. And to Mike's point, users did largely engage with the map as their sort of preferred hotel finder position, right? I mean, we've seen in other verticals very limited engagement with the map, and if you're in the 1, 2, or 3rd local pack spot, that's really where the clicks came from. Very much not true in hotels. The map was far and away the main place that people were engaging, and so I think it's interesting from a from a positioning standpoint on Google's part. We heard in the workshop that the commission ran back in March that they're sort of trying to put themselves in the middle, saying we don't want to referee this battle between aggregators and suppliers. But I think that the third option is one that, Greg, you sort of brought up obliquely here, is that, if Google were to give suppliers more visibility in their organic algorithm, which frankly they do in plenty of other local search categories, you see independent businesses ranking just fine in the organic results. And if they were to sort of turn the dial up in favor of suppliers within their organic algorithm, you might see more user engagement with organic traditional websites of hotel suppliers.
I have one just personal comment about using Booking.com in the United States. I mean, I don't know, whenever it was, 10 years ago, I used to use Kayak and Booking regularly, but their terms became so onerous. And if you ran into a problem, it was so difficult to get it fixed because they'd say, oh, it's hotel. And the hotel would say, oh, it's Booking. And so, at least in the United States, I and many people I know stopped using aggregators, and all the hotels ended up with effectively the same price, and their presence in the ad units is more visible in the United States. And I find that difference interesting, and I don't know whether it's consumer driven or policy driven. Maybe in Europe, Booking has better refund policies when there's a problem, that sort of stuff, so that people don't find it as onerous to use it. Don't know, but do either of you use these directories?
I use hotels.com.
Right. So
No,
my sister
I never.
used
I
hotels.
always book directly on the hotel property.
Right.
I've used an aggregator in a decade, probably. Yeah.
I want to book on the hotel property, but I often find that the prices are no better and the user experience is not good in many of these instances.
Right. My sister, though, we had to go to that emergency funeral last week, and she booked on hotels.com and didn't notice that hotels.com was a week out, and then she couldn't get a refund. And it's like, and that's the kind of stuff that turns people off aggregators, at least in this country. Turned me off. Like with Local U, when we used to do these trip planning and people would use Booking.com, we'd always have trouble. And we ultimately recommend that all speakers not go direct. So, don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather book directly with the hotel. Oh, I almost said the hospital. I'd rather book directly with the hotel, but yeah, hopefully that's not some harbinger of doom. It's a Freudian slip. But I tried recently to book a hotel on a hotel website, and in New York, I have to go to New York for a cousin's 95th birthday, believe it or not, and I couldn't book on the hotel page did not allow me to book. It was not working. And, and I called them and tried to get the price that I saw, and I got a better price on hotels.com, unfortunately. But there's a lot of manipulation and deception going on, and dark patterns on these hotel booking sites, these aggregators, which we could talk about for a long time.
Well, and there's also just a case in the EU about Booking not being able to enforce price parity, where you can't offer a lower price on a different aggregator. That's part of Booking's terms to an individual hotel, and I believe that was found to be illegal by the justice.
Yeah, Amazon's been accused of doing that with sellers in the United States. Similar thing. Okay, so and one final thing that we should mention is that according to a Bloomberg report, it does look like, this is not entirely clear, it does look like the European Commission is set to find Google not in compliance in this hotel travel context, and Google's trying to sort of negotiate with them to head off a formal charge sheet is what it's called.
Well, the solution that they're proposing is also likely to be not particularly compliant in terms of the solution. Again, according to this Bloomberg piece, they're proposing to add sort of a separate chips and tabs at the top of the main search result, which we found very little engagement with, not just in this category, but in others. In fact, we found the most engagement with it in hotels, and it was still, less than 10% of users clicked one of those chips or tabs. So people just it's like banner blindness. They just sort of ignore that and scroll to the shiny objects, which are ads, largely carousel ads in the hotel finder. So,
although to Greg's point in the newsletter, how much of this regulation is effectively a form of protectionism and a form of attempting to, and a lot of it is attempting to build out their own local players in these markets. But that may be
that's 50% of it.
This will be a particularly interesting use case, though, because Booking, I believe, is headquartered in the Netherlands, and they are now one of these they're one of the designated gatekeepers, or on their way to becoming a designated gatekeeper, also subject to the Digital Markets Act. So the sort of protectionist case will be interesting to see if the Commission goes after Google and Booking equally aggressively, or if there is a little bit lighter touch with respect to Booking as a gatekeeper. So
certainly with Apple, we've seen a lighter touch with the music service. What's the other music service?
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.